concrètes, des salaires compétitifs et des chances réelles de progresser. Compétences Canada Ontario t'accompagne avec des programmes dynamiques et des compétitions qui t'ouvrent des portes vers plein d'opportunités. Découvre le métier qui te passionne et laisse ta marque dans ta communauté. Pour en savoir plus, skillsontario.com et commence à bâtir ton avenir dès aujourd'hui.
At Medcan, we know that life's greatest moments are built on a foundation of good health, from the big milestones to the quiet wins. That's why our annual health assessment offers a physician-led, full-body checkup that provides a clear picture of your health today and may uncover early signs of conditions like heart disease and cancer. A healthier you means more moments to cherish. Take control of your well-being and book an assessment today. Medcan. Live well for life. Visit medcan.com/moments to get started.
Megan Rapinoe here. This week on A Touch More, figure skating legend Tara Lipinski joins us to talk about the upcoming Winter Olympics, whether this will be the comeback year for U.S. women's figure skating, and what she learned about herself after appearing on the reality show, The Traitors. Plus, we're talking about the NWSL's high-impact player rule, aka the Rodman rule, and why the Players Union is against it. Check out the latest episode of A Touch More wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube.
This is Unexplainable. I'm Meredith Hodnott. Lead used to be everywhere. It was in the air, pumped out of industrial smokestacks and cars burning leaded gasoline. It was in the water, lining municipal water pipes. Lead was in the ground floor. It was painted onto walls. It was glazed onto dinner CDC surveyed thousands of Americans across the country to see just how much of that lead was in people's blood.
And obviously that's like really labor intensive work. You've got to like go out in the field to a nationally representative sample, do this blood testing.
Dylan Scott reports on health for Vox.
And what this survey reported back was that like blood lead levels were much higher than people had assumed and had reached a really concerning threshold.
This survey in the 70s was a wake-up call. It led to decades of bans, regulations, and emissions controls.
We've gotten to a place where it's like, you know, there is still lead poisoning in the US, but we're in a completely different reality than we were 30, 40, 50 years ago, and that was made possible by
At MedCan, we know that life's greatest moments are built on a foundation of good health, from the big milestones to the quiet wins. That's why our annual health assessment offers a physician-led, full-body checkup that provides a clear picture of your health today and may uncover early signs of conditions like heart disease and cancer. A healthier you means more moments to cherish. Take control of your well-being and book an assessment today. MedCan. Live well for life. Visit medcan.com/moments to get started.
Megan Rapinoe here. This week on A Touch More, figure skating legend Tara Lipinski joins us to talk about the upcoming Winter Olympics, whether this will be the comeback year for U.S. women's figure skating, and what she learned about herself after appearing on the reality show, The Traitors. Plus, we're talking about the NWSL's high-impact player rule, aka the Rodman rule, and why the Players Union is against it. Check out the latest episode of A Touch More wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube.
This is Unexplainable. I'm Meredith Hodnott. Lead used to be everywhere. It was in the air, pumped out of industrial smokestacks and cars burning leaded gasoline. It was in the water, lining municipal water pipes. Lead was in the ground soil. It was painted onto walls. It was glazed onto dinner plates. And so in 1976, the CDC surveyed thousands of Americans across the country to see just how much of that lead was in people's blood.
And obviously that's like really labor intensive work. You've got to like go out in the field to a nationally representative sample, do this blood testing.
Dylan Scott reports on health for Vox.
And what this survey reported back was that like blood lead levels were much higher than people had assumed and had reached a really concerning threshold.
This survey in the 70s was a wake-up call. It led to decades of bans, regulations, and emissions controls.
We've gotten to a place where it's like, you know, there is still lead poisoning in the US, but we're in a completely different reality than we were 30, 40, 50 years ago, and that was made possible by the survey data.
Going out into the world and collecting information on what's actually happening through surveys and blood tests, but also monitors, sensors, experiments. Data is the bedrock of good science, so it can profoundly impact our everyday lives. But over the last year, Dylan, covering public health, and Umair Irfan, covering science and the environment, they've seen the systems we rely on to collect good data get eroded away. Hello, Dylan. Hello, Umair. You guys report for Vox's health, science, and climate team. And so we're coming up on a year into the second Trump administration, a year that has totally transformed scientific research in this country. And I wanted to dig in with you. Like, when I think of the federal government, I don't necessarily think, oh yeah, so crucial for gathering basic data, I guess like beyond the census or something, but like, can you lay out how important the federal government is in this role?
Yeah, I mean, I cover healthcare, and something to your point, Meredith, that I think I knew in the back of my mind, but did not fully appreciate until this past year, is that the federal government is like the biggest public health pollster that we have. Like the federal government, you know, is the only one that has the resources to go ask tens of thousands of Americans about all kinds of stuff, whether it's like, do you smoke? What do you eat? Are you obese? Do you have a substance abuse problem? Things like that, to just keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening in this country and with people's health.
Umair, where does the federal government play a role for climate science and data gathering?
Well, the federal government has a lot of resources. There are almost no private institutions that can launch satellites at the scale that the US federal government can do. There are almost no networks of sensors, of weather monitors, of weather balloons that can cope with what the US federal government does. So without this, we have a much more murky picture of what's going on in the country.
Umair, there's a lot of overlap between people's health and the environments that they live in. Tell me about the changes at the EPA and how that's making it harder to understand those connections.
Well, the EPA's Office of Research and Development, like their mission was to provide a scientific basis for regulations. EPA, when it issues a rule, it has to draw on real world data. And so they actually conduct tests on animals, and they use sample data from the environment, and they collect a lot of information and study human physiology to see if they can unpack the mechanism behind which something like nonstick coatings on your frying pans affect your health, or whether some of these additives to plastics can be endocrine disruptors. They measure that, they validate that with testing, and then they issue a regulation based on that. And over the past year, we've seen the Office of Research and Development. It was shuttered, and without this, the United States is now functioning without one of the most robust and best institutions that was doing this kind of work.
Wow. Looking kind of wider to the big climate picture here, how has this year impacted what we know?
I'm snorting already. Already. We haven't even started. What's gonna happen?
Science chats with our favorite nerds.
Hi, I'm Wendy Zuckerman, and you're listening to Science Versus. Today on the show, the wonderful chemistry and science of food. Yeah, because, even if you've never set foot in a lab, you are doing a little bit of science every day when you add a little salt to your pasta, or you cook your vegetables, or even if you make a Betty Crocker cake. You are doing some really cool science. And one award-winning chef who's thought a lot about all this is Samin Nosrat. She's the author of the best-selling book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. She has a new book out. It's called Good Things. And I wanted to get Samin on the show for ages because she makes me think about cooking and the food that I shove in my mouth in this completely new and very nerdy way. And so that's what we're talking about today, the science of cooking. Plus, why you should never put meatballs on spaghetti. My interview with Samin Nosrat is coming up just after the break. Welcome to the show, Samin. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me.
Growing up in San Diego, I've heard you say, and you write about it a little bit in the new book, that you never really felt like you belonged that much in San Diego. Can you tell us about it?
Well, I mean, my family's from Iran, and my parents came to San Diego sometime in the mid-70s. In 1979, there was a religious revolution in Iran, so a lot of people sort of sensed that coming. And my parents, my father's side of the family practiced a religion called the Baha'i Faith, and they were persecuted, so they all fled and were religious asylees. And my mom came after, followed my dad here. And so I was born here, and I was born here to a family who wasn't entirely willingly, in San Diego. It was just, right, there's the trauma of leaving your homeland behind. There was, in ways I'm sure I can't imagine, and probably many ways I witnessed, there was racism and sort of Islamophobia directed at us and to my parents, and I'm sure that they had a pretty clear sense of not feeling very welcome or belonging here. And I also think because they didn't leave, especially my mom did not leave Iran thinking she'd be gone forever. My mom would say things like, you know, when you leave this house, like you're stepping into America, but when you step over the threshold into the house, this is Iran, and you're gonna like behave like an Iranian child, right? And my mom, it was so important for her to instill in us a relationship to the place that we were from. And one of the ways that she did that sort of most powerfully was through food. And I have always loved to eat. So like, and the food is good, you know.
And your mom's an amazing
and
chef.
my mom's a great cook. Yeah. And there were things where like I would bring Persian food to school for lunch, and people, you know, it was the classic like immigrant kid being like, ew, what's that? The smell of the whatever in the lunchroom. And
they would have been eating some disgusting peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Totally. And so, or like,
Americans are gonna get mad at me saying that, but it's just.
oh, you think it's, oh yeah, I actually love PBJ too, but I know it's a very American thing though. Like other cultures are like, what are you people doing putting that stuff in your mouth? But then, and what's funny is now, like, you know, 40 years later, Persian food and a lot of Middle Eastern Persian food, a lot of times it gets appropriated by non-Iranian cooks onto their restaurant menus, where it gets a sort of a glam, like a makeover. And on the one hand, I'm really happy for more and more people to have exposure to our foods. And in other ways, it makes me so mad. Like, it's like, you want our food, you know what I mean? You want to eat the crispy rice. Or there was a drink I used to have. It's like a summer drink called sekanjabin, which is like it's kind of like maybe an early relative of a shrub. So it's like a vinegar and sugar syrup that's boiled down with mint. And you make this like really thick, very fragrant minty syrup. And it's so tangy and refreshing. It's kind of like the original Gatorade in a way. Like, right? It was just one of my favorite childhood things. And I remember having like a water bottle of it with the mint leaf in it when I was a kid. And some people, like little kids at school, were like, ew, gross. Like, what's in your water? You gross, like alien. You know? And now, of course, like every like hipster bar has shrubs on their menu, you know? So there's just this way where it's like an extra pain, a level of pain where I'm like, this is yet another way in which like our humanity is not recognized, and you just like you pick and choose what you want. And this is like historically been done against all, you know what I mean? Like, Americans love tacos but hate Mexicans. So like, it's just it's not unique to us, but it does hurt when I feel that.
You talk about in your new book that as a kid, cake mixes became like a Betty Crocker cake became kind
My
of this
obsession.
symbol. Your obsession. What was it about the Betty Crocker cake or the, you know, those cake mixes?
I mean, my mom was really she was very committed to like an organic only like low sugar, you know, like sort of a very hippie like rules in the household for the children of like we're only eating fresh fruits and vegetables. We shopped at the like hippie co-op, and so it's not that we were never allowed dessert, but even when she went to get us the birthday cakes and things for occasions, special occasions, they came from like the finest European bakeries, right? And they were covered in chocolate shavings, and they were just this like dense chocolate cake. And I just never wanted to eat that. I wanted to eat what all the white kids had, like at the bake sales. I wanted to eat the fluffy yellow yellow cake with chocolate frosting, like it was soft, and I would have never been allowed to have that. That was like not okay. It never entered our home.
Yeah.
And so this is again going back to the like outsiderness. I think it became a symbol, like the yellow cake in a way became like this symbol of fitting in. And so and there is something just extraordinary about cake mixes and the very light, like incredibly tender texture, which almost feels like it's like a space like astronaut food or something, because it's not, it's like doesn't seem naturally achievable. And so I sort of became obsessed as a young cook and with like there must be a way to achieve some sort of like lightness, because every cake you make a cake with butter and it's dense and heavy. You could use the same exact ingredients as what's in the you think is in the yellow cake mix. You could follow The Joy of Cooking, Martha Stewart, anybody's like classic yellow cake recipe, and it would still come out quite dense. And I just wanted this lightness.
Yeah, how do the cake mixes do it? What?
So this was a many-year journey for me, and I didn't know the science of it. But over time, I learned that like butter is made of, it's made of fat primarily, but also milk solids, which are like proteins, and water. It's an emulsion. And so when you cream butter and you are like, whipping sugar into it to make this like kind of light texture, you're aerating the butter, and that's the main source of lightness in a cake. Butter is in this kind of emulsist. It's like a magical state of emulsion. That's why it's like it can be on your counter and it's a solid, right?
Yeah.
It kind of has this incredible range of temperatures at which it stays in this solid emulsified state, which is why it's like that amazing thing when you like spread cold butter on your warm toast, and it's like kind of like some of it melts, but some of it's just soft still when you bite into the soft butter.
Yes.
And so you have that, and the thing about it is the melting point of butter, like chocolate, is very close to our body temperature. So it's so pleasing the way it melts. It melts on the tongue in this really amazing way, right?
Yes.
That's like think of you eat a piece of chocolate, and like part of the pleasure of it is it's just like melting on your tongue. And so so butter is kind of this miracle ingredient, but also like you have to understand there's water in there, and when water and flour combine and start mixing, that's when gluten strands start forming. Gluten is a protein that leads to chewiness and toughness. It's what you want to develop gluten in something like a crusty loaf of bread, so that when you cut into it or bite into it, you get that like sourdough chew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's not the thing you want in a cake. In a cake, you want it to like crumble and dissolve tenderly on. Or that's what I want. Is like tenderness on my tongue. And so you want to prevent gluten from forming, which is why they use lower protein, lower gluten flours, things like cake flour and pastry flour to make cake. And also, when you have oil, so fat inhibits gluten formation. It kind of coats flour, and it makes, like, you can think of it almost like it makes it slippery. So it's the flour is not going to combine into long gluten strands, because it's kind of like lubricated by this outer layer of fat.
Right.
So then the way cake mix is made industrially, like at some point I kind of went and learned about that. And it's made in, you can think of them like massive food processors, just like huge machines where they combine all the dry ingredients with shortening, which is a solid fat. It's a solid oil, right? And they mix, and because it is solid but it's soft at regular room temperature, they can put shortening in there and coat the flour, mix it without any. They're pre oiling the flour in the cake mix, so that when you bring it home and you add your oil and your water, your less gluten will form. But it doesn't, and it's done for so long and on such an industrial level and so carefully that you can't see the fat, right? You don't see any of that. You can't. It just looks like flour and cocoa powder when you dump out a chocolate cake mix. But that's what's happened to it, is like the flour has already been pre-coated with fat. And so I just was like, I'll never be able to do that. I don't want to make a cake with shortening. That's not going to taste good. Like, I want it to be with butter, but I don't know how to do this. And then at some point I stumbled into, which is so funny, because maybe if I had been looking, well, like if I had been more I'm not saying I'm like methodical in any of this. I am not a scientist.
But are we at 2 decades in this journey right now?
Yeah, which honestly, maybe if I had been more methodical, I could have solved this a lot sooner. Because literally there is a book. It is a legendary book called The Cake Bible. Like, honestly, I could have just looked at the Cake Bible.
No, but come on. You think like in Lord of the Rings, Frodo could have just looked at the map, It's got the journey.
Totally. So like Rose Levy Berenbaum is kind of this extraordinary, just like queen of cakes. And she wrote this book called The Cake Bible. So whereas when a typical yellow cake, a typical sort of homemade cake starts with room temperature butter that you're whipping sugar into, and that step is called creaming, reverse creaming sort of mimics what's done in the cake mix industry, right? Where you take your flour and your sugar, and if you're using cocoa powder, whatever your dry ingredients are, and then you take very soft, but not too soft, not so soft that it will separate into water and fat, butter. You take butter that is just at the exact right temperature, and you work it into the flour in very slowly in your mixer or your food processor in such a way that, like, by the time you've worked all the flour in, it actually just looks, by the time you've worked the butter in, the flour just looks like a dry ingredient. It's kind of amazing. Wow. It is this, but it's all about having the butter. Yeah, I mean, Rose did it. And it was one of those things where I was like, this was here all along, and I feel like I'm such an idiot. And also I felt like a genius, because the first time I made it, people came over and I was like, I did it, you guys, I made a homemade Betty Crocker. And people were like, I don't know. And then they started eating it. They're like, oh my God, it really tastes like it. So it felt like that was truly a miracle that I thought I know. There were so many bad cakes on the way to that cake.
In the middle.
Yeah.
You did it.
I did it, yeah.
Okay, so to continue on with your journey, a lot of people, including me, sort of first met you after you wrote the book Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, which then became this Netflix documentary, which is amazing, the book, the documentary. For those who haven't come across it, what is the overriding thesis of Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat?
Yeah. It's basically that if you can sort of grasp why salt, fat, acid, and heat are important elements, and understand, their function in the kitchen on flavor and on texture, and how to balance them and how to use them, that they will work as sort of the 4 points on the compass for you as a cook, no matter what you're cooking. And so whether or not you want to follow a recipe, paying attention to salt, fat, acid, and heat will enhance the way that you feel independent, are able to cook instinctively, understand what's going on underneath the maybe steps 1 through 6 that someone else lays out for you, so that in case you need to substitute something, you understand why that vinegar was there and why it would work or wouldn't work to replace it with lemon juice.
Yeah.
So with salt and fat and acid, those are all tangible. Fats come in many forms. There's oils and butters, there's animal fats. And same with acid, comes in many forms. But heat is kind of this like ineffable, intangible thing. But as a young cook, I kind of